We are now on the record. My name is James Arndt. I'm a videographer for Galco Litigation Services. Today's date is January 15th, 2019, and the time is 9:09 a.m. This video deposition is being held in St. Louis, Missouri, in the matter of the National Prescription Opiate Litigation for the United States District Court for the Northern District of Ohio, Eastern Division. The deponent is Karen Harper. Will counsel please identify themselves?
Good morning, David Cove, Keller Rohrbach on behalf of the plaintiffs.
Derek Lozier from Keller Rohrbach for the plaintiffs.
Tricia Hersfeld, Brinksetter, Strange and Jennings for the Tennessee plaintiffs.
Julie Fixmeyer, Armstrong Teasdale for Cardinal Health.
Emily Cavesselis, Covington and Burling for McKesson.
Nick Hodges, Jones Day for Walmart.
William Davison, Robeson Gray for Mallincrodt LLC, Spec GX LLC, and the witness.
Andrew O'Connor from Robeson Gray for Mallincrodt LLC, Spec GX, and Ms. Harper.
Will counsel present by phone please identify themselves?
David Hybe of Arnold and Porter for the Endo and Spar defendants.
Sylvia Winston of Jackson and Kelly for the AmerisourceBergen Drug Corporation.
The court reporter is Carrie Campbell, and she will now swear in the witness.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Before we get started, I just wanted to note for the record that yesterday evening, Mallincrott's counsel had provided some documents, another production of documents, including some documents apparently from Ms. Harper's custodial file. Appears to be a fairly substantial production. We didn't get a chance to review those, so I just wanted to note for the record that we reserve the right to reopen this deposition based on that review.
And we believe the documents we produced don't prejudice the plaintiffs in any way, and happy to discuss that further, but disagree with your characterization.
Good morning. We met earlier just a moment ago. Could you please state and spell your name for the record?
Yes. Karen Harper, Karen Harper.
Ms. Harper, where do you currently reside?
St. Louis County, Missouri.
Okay. And I know that you have had your deposition taken at least once before in connection with a matter involving Island Drug Pharmacy. Have you had your deposition taken at any other time other than that instance?
Earlier in my life, before I was an employee of Mallincrodt.
Okay, so how many times have you been deposed?
Twice.
Okay. So you understand probably some of the ground rules, but I just want to remind you of a few that are important to me today. The court reporters have the most important job here in transcribing everything that we're saying, so it's very important that we don't talk over one another. So please wait until I finish my question before you move on to your response, and likewise I'll wait until you finish your question before I move on to my next question. Does that sound good?
Yes.
And to the extent I ask a yes or no question, I would ask that you actually in fact answer yes or no if that's your response, rather than shaking your head or nodding your head.
Understood.
Okay. And from time to time, counsel at this table may object to my questioning, but unless you get a clear instruction not to respond, I would ask that you respond to my question. Okay?
Yes.
Right. I think we're here for a fairly long time today, so to the extent you need breaks throughout the day, please feel free to ask, and I'll do my best to accommodate, okay?
Thank you.
Ms. Harper, is there anything that you can think of today that will prevent you from testifying truthfully and honestly?
No.
Okay, great. Ms. Harper, what did you do to prepare for this deposition today?
I met with my attorneys.
Okay, and who are they?
Robeson Gray.
Okay, and Mr. O'Connor and Mr. Davison sitting here today, are those the two individuals that you met with?
Yes, among others.
Okay, and how many attorneys did you meet with?
At least one other.
Okay, and how many times did you meet?
5 times.
Okay, so you met for 5 different days or 5 different sessions?
5 different sessions.
Okay, and how many hours total would you say that would be?
The first 2 sessions were 2 8-hour days, so 16 and 16, 32. Then we had an 8-hour day, 40, and another 2 8-hour days, so 56 hours.
Sounds like a lot of preparation. Other than your outside counsel or other than Robeson Gray, were there any other people present during your meetings?
No.
Okay. And in those meetings, did you review any documents?
Yes.
Okay. And Were those documents selected by counsel?
Yes.
Okay. And did you provide any documents in any of these meetings?
Not in those meetings.
Okay. In preparation for this deposition today, have you spoken with any current or former employees of Mallincrodt?
Only to the extent that I needed to be absent from work.
Okay. Are you aware that other former and current employees of Mallincrodt have been deposed?
Yes.
Okay. Have you spoke with any of those deponents?
No, sir.
Okay. You know who Bill Ratliff is, right?
Yes.
Have you spoken with him about this deposition at all?
No.
Okay. Do you know who John Gillies is?
Yes.
Have you spoken with him?
No.
Ms. Harper, where did you go to school? In college? Excuse me.
I only have a couple of years partial college credits, and so that was at Community College District, St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay. And what was the name of that school?
Merrimack Community College.
Okay. And did you actually obtain a degree?
I did not.
Okay. And where did you... By the way, what year did you stop going to school?
So I graduated from high school and took intermittent college classes, but never achieved a degree. So I graduated from high school in 1974.
Okay. And after you stopped going to community college, where did you first work?
Goldman and Gibson, it was a specialty advertising company.
Okay. And what did you do there?
Clerical.
Okay. When did you first start working at Mallincrodt?
In March of 1975.
Okay. So there was a brief period of about approximately 1 year between when you ceased going to community college and when you started working at Mallincrodt?
Yes.
Okay. And what was your first job at Mallincrodt?
Clerk typist.
Okay. And clerk typist for what division or department?
Purchasing group in the corporate area.
Okay. And how long did you do that?
Approximately 1 year.
Okay. I may want to walk through each position you had at Mallincrodt, but why don't we try this way? When did you first become senior manager of controlled substance compliance?
I don't remember the year.
Okay. Do you remember if it was the late 70s or the early 80s?
I'm sorry, I don't remember the year.
Okay. And when I say controlled substance compliance, it's my understanding that the group was actually called DEA compliance at the time. Does
Correct.
that comport with your understanding?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And so you have no recollection of when you became senior manager of DEA compliance?
I have recollection, but I can't remember the year. I'm sorry.
Okay. And what is your recollection? Is it approximately, I mean, are we talking the 1990s that you became the senior manager, or is it the 80s?
It would have been in the after 2000.
After 2000?
Yes.
Okay. So from the period between when you became senior manager of controlled substance compliance, or DEA compliance, and when you were first started at Mallincrodt, there was approximately 25 years that had passed?
Yes.
Okay. And how was it that you became senior manager of that group after starting as a clerical typist?
I moved into senior manager after I went to the Controlled Substances Compliance Group. I was a coordinator in that department, then became manager, and then became senior manager.
Okay. And when did you become coordinator of the DEA compliance / CSC?
I'm not certain of the year. 2001 approximate.
Okay. That's, I believe that's when you said you became senior manager. I was asking when you first became a coordinator, as you described earlier, approximately when was that?
No, sir, I'm sorry. I think I said I became senior manager after year 2000, but I couldn't remember the year. I apologize.
I got it. So in around 2001 is when you became a coordinator.
Yes.
At the control for this DEA
Yes,
compliance group.
yes.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And at the time you became involved in the DEA compliance group, were you aware that Mallincrodt was manufacturing controlled substances?
Yes.
Including prescription opioids?
Yes.
Okay. And by the way, have you ever worked for the DEA?
No,
Have you ever worked for the government?
no,
Have you worked for any employer whose responsibility was to perform diversion type activities on controlled substances?
no,
Okay. Other than the 1 year between finishing your, or other than 1 year between when you stopped going to community college and when you started working at Mallincrodt, fair to say that you had no other employment. In other words, from 1975 to present, you have always worked at Mallincrodt, correct?
that is correct.
Okay. At the time you joined in 2001, the approximate 2001 time period, when you joined the DEA compliance team, approximately how large was that team?
3 or 4 people.
Okay, and who were those 3 or 4 people?
My manager and 2 other compliance coordinators.
Okay, who was your manager at that time?
The gentleman's name is Jay Fouché.
Okay,
Would you like for me to spell that?
that's okay. We can get it later.
All right.
And so you reported to him.
Yes.
Okay, and you said 2 other compliance managers who were
Compliance coordinators.
coordinators. Excuse
Yes,
me.
sir.
Thank you. Who were they?
Mary Lewis and a gentleman named Lee Nelson.
And did the composition or the size of this team change over time?
Yes.
Okay. Did it expand, I assume?
Yes.
And when do you recall when it first expanded beyond the 3 or 4 people you've mentioned?
After a few years went by, and I'm sorry I don't know the year, the company purchased an additional controlled substances facility in Hobart, New York, and the department grew after that.
Okay. To what extent did it grow?
There are 2 persons who were in the DEA compliance group at Hobart, New York as an isolated department, and we became one group. And there was another person who is in the group at our Webster Groves narcotics manufacturing facility. So our group became united as one corporate department, if you will.
Okay. So fair to say it doubled in size. Your group became
Yes.
7 or 8 people?
Yes.
Okay. At any time that you were involved in the DEA compliance group, was the group ever comprised of more than 10 individuals?
No.
Okay. It was always approximately anywhere from 3 to 8 people?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Harper, are you familiar with the Controlled Substances Act?
Yes.
And are you familiar that pursuant to the Controlled Substances Act that registrants have a fundamental duty to maintain effective controls against diversion?
Yes, I believe the language is to guard against diversion, but yes.
Okay. And are you familiar that under the, do you mind if I call the Controlled Substances Act the CSA?
I don't mind.
Okay. Are you familiar that pursuant to the CSA that registrants have a duty to monitor and implement a system to identify suspicious orders?
Yes, I'm aware.
Okay. And these obligations have existed since the time that the CSA was enacted, correct?
I don't know the date of the CSA versus the creation of CFR 21.
Okay. And by CFR 21, are you referring to what's commonly referred to as the regs that are interpreting the CSA?
Yes.
Okay. Regardless of when they were enacted, you understood at the time that you joined the DEA compliance group in 2001 that the CSA required registrants to design and implement a system to identify suspicious orders. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. What was your compensation when you first became a coordinator in the DEA compliance group in 2001?
I don't know.
Okay. Can you give us an approximation?
I'm sorry, I really can't.
Was it less than $50,000?
I honestly don't know. I can't remember. I'm sorry.
Okay. Was it less than $25,000?
I'm sorry, I can't remember.
All right. What was your compensation when you became senior manager of DEA compliance?
I can't remember my salary over the years.
Okay. Do you have an approximate recollection of how much you made?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you recall if it was $75,000 or more or above?
No, sir, I don't recall.
Okay. Do you know what your salary is currently?
Yes.
Okay. And you're currently director of Controlled Substance Compliance, correct?
Yes.
And what is your salary currently?
I'm going to give you two numbers because I get that mixed up as well. I'm sorry. It's either $165,000 or $169,000 per year.
And do you have any equity?
Yes.
And what does that equity consist of?
There's shares that have been gifted to me.
And when did you start receiving shares in the company?
I don't recall the year.
Okay. And do you have any other? Do you have a retirement package at all?
Yes.
Okay. And what does that consist of?
It's a 401k.
Okay. Other than the 401k and shares that you have been gifted, do you have any other additional compensation in addition to your salary?
Yes.
And what does that consist of?
A bonus, an annual bonus.
Okay. And approximately how much is that?
It's a percent of the salary based upon the performance of the company.
Okay. And what's the approximate percentage that you received last year?
20%.
Okay. And has that, over the time that you've either been senior manager or director of Controlled Substance Compliance, has it been that approximate percentage?
Yes.
Okay, great. Ms. Harper, have you reviewed any court documents or pleadings in this case?
I'm not certain.
Okay. Are you aware that there's a case currently pending in Ohio, generally titled the National Opioid Litigation?
Yes.
And you're aware that there are approximately 1,500 jurisdictions that have filed suit against various manufacturers, distributors, and retail pharmacies of prescription opioids?
Yes.
Okay. And are you aware that these jurisdictions have alleged that these entities are responsible for the opioid crisis?
Yes.
Okay. By the way, are you aware, strike that. Are you generally aware that these jurisdictions are alleging that these entities should be responsible for the costs that these entities have incurred as a result of responding to the opioid crisis?
Yes, in general.
Okay. And are you aware of any complaints that have actually been filed against your company?
No.
Okay. So you haven't read any of the complaints that have been filed against Mallincrodt?
I've read pieces of the MDL, but nothing specific to Mallincrodt.
Okay. When you say pieces of the MDL, what do you mean?
The multi-district litigation.
And in particular, when you say pieces, I'm just trying to get an understanding of what you've reviewed.
So we receive a pharma news brief every single day, and so there will be excerpts from the various matters related to the MDL, Judge Polster's rulings, etc.
I see. So you, in other words, you're getting and receiving and reviewing just news updates about the MDL.
Correct.
Okay, great. Ms. Harper, do you agree that there is an opioid epidemic in this country?
Objective form.
Yes, I do.
Okay. And are you aware that there's been an opioid epidemic in this country for quite some time?
Objective form.
I don't know, sir, what you mean by quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
Can you? I don't know.
When did you first start believing that there was an opioid epidemic in this country?
Approximately mid-2000s.
The mid-2000s?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you familiar with Mallincrodt's market share of prescription opioids?
On some products, yes.
Okay. With respect to the generic product line of Mallincrott, are you aware of Mallincrott's market share in the generic line of business?
Not overall, no, sir.
Okay. Are you aware that Mallincrott has been either the number one or number two in terms of market share, generic manufacturer of prescription opioids for the last 20 or so years?
Objective form.
That is not the statistic I have heard.
Okay. What is the statistic that you have heard?
That we're in the top 5
Okay.
of the share of generic suppliers.
Okay. And generic suppliers of prescription opioids in particular, correct?
Yes.
And currently, do you understand that Mallincrodt has the #1 market share of generic prescription opioids?
Objective
I
form.
don't, I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't know our current market position.
Okay. During your time as director or senior manager of controlled substance compliance, have you ever inquired as to the market share of Mallincrodt with respect to prescription opioids?
On certain specific drug substances, yes.
And which specific drug substances?
So I'll use the example methylphenidate. When we are applying for quota, if there is an intent or if we have a belief that we will grow our market share, I need to learn the existing market share that Mallincrodt holds.
Okay. And when, over the last 20 or so years, have you inquired into that? Has that been inquiries that you've made on a pretty regular basis?
Objective form.
Yes, in coordination with quota requests to DEA, yes.
Yeah. And those quota requests on an annual basis, correct?
Quota is granted on an annual basis, but the requests are an iterative process throughout a calendar year.
Okay. And so you would say that you have regularly, I just want to make sure I understand, when you have inquired into understanding Mallincrodt's market share, and you've said on a fairly consistent basis, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And consistent means that throughout the year, as you've described, in connection with issues when dealing with quota requests to the DEA?
Objective form.
Yes, throughout the year, but on certain drug substances at different times, sir.
Okay. Going back to your current position as Director of Controlled Substance Compliance.
Sorry.
That's okay. When did you become Director?
Within the last 6 months.
Okay, so fairly recently.
Yes, sir.
And before that, you were Senior Manager of Controlled Substance Compliance, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so was this considered a promotion?
Yes.
Okay. And who did you replace, if at all, if anyone?
No one.
Okay. So was this position created for you?
Yes.
Okay. And what were the circumstances of creating this position?
It was an evolution, if you will, of my existing job responsibilities that merited a different title.
Okay. And now that you're Director, do you have people that report to you?
Yes.
And who reports to you?
I have 2 direct reports. They are managers of controlled substances compliance.
And who are they?
There's a gentleman named, his name is Dave Hunter.
And who's the other person? You said there were 2?
Eileen Spalding.
Okay. And you have worked with Mr. Hunter and Ms. Spalding before, correct?
Correct.
And you worked with them in connection with the Controlled Substance Compliance team throughout the time you were Senior Manager, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'd like to hand you an exhibit. Go ahead and mark this as Harper Exhibit 1. And there's no base on this, but this appears to be a printout of your LinkedIn profile. Is that correct?
Yes.
And does that appear to be an accurate reflection or copy of your LinkedIn profile?
Yes.
I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I do want to ask you a question about your involvement in the National Association of Drug Diversion Investigators. Do you see that reference? I believe that's on the next page.
Yes, I see it.
That?
Yes.
And it indicates that you've been a member of the NADDI since 2013.
Yes.
What is the NADDI?
It's a group, it's a consortium of industry, law enforcement leaders that assemble to discuss the issues around diversion.
Okay. And diversion of controlled substances?
Yes.
Okay. And did you have any involvement in the NADDI prior to 2013?
Yes.
Okay. And what was that involvement?
We received information feed entitled RX News.
Okay. From the NADDI?
Yes, sir.
Other than receiving news from the NADDI, did you have any other type of involvement with them?
No.
Okay. Were you ever, the first time you became a member of the NADDI was in 2013?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any involvement with any type of diversion organization prior to 2013?
Yes.
And which one is that?
The group name is Midwest Controlled Substances Compliance Discussion Group.
Okay. And I believe I've seen plenty of references to that group in the documents, but is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that a type of industry working group?
That's correct.
In other words, there were other manufacturers and distributors that were part of that group?
No distributors.
Okay, thank you. So manufacturers of prescription opioids were in that group, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Other than that group, any other organization that you were involved in?
No.
Okay. Are you familiar with the National Association of Controlled Substances Authorities?
Oh, yes. I beg your pardon.
Okay, so you had involvement with them?
I'd like to clarify my previous answer.
Sure.
I have been a member of National Association of Controlled Substances Authorities.
Okay, since when?
I don't recall the date. Approximately December 2013 forward.
Okay, so about the same time you joined the NADDI?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you have any involvement with this National Association of Controlled Substance Authorities prior to 2013?
Not that I recall.
Okay. So fair to say, other than the Midwest Substance Compliance Working Group, prior to 2013, you had no other involvement with any other diversion type group?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Did you ever consider membership or joining any such groups?
No.
Okay. Why not?
My job was full-time, and my husband was ill, so I did not participate in extracurricular activities, if you will.
Okay. And let's take a step back. When you became, I understand you don't recall when you became senior manager of controlled substance compliance, but turning back to the first page of your LinkedIn profile, it indicates that, or at least the profile indicates that you have been senior manager for 43 years. Is that incorrect?
That's incorrect.
Okay. It's more accurate to say that you've been senior manager for some period less than 17 years when considering that you joined the Controlled Substance Compliance Group in 2001?
Yes.
Okay. And when you first became senior manager of the Controlled Substance Compliance Group, what were your general responsibilities?
The same as they were as manager, except, with one exception, I had, when the company met with DEA, I was present at those meetings where I had not been necessarily in my previous position.
Okay, so in your previous position, you had never communicated or never met with the DEA, but when you became senior manager, you became more involved and met actually with the DEA.
Objective form.
So I'd like to clarify, please.
Sure.
All through my career in controlled substances compliance, I communicated with DEA in the course of inspections and on quota requests.
Okay, and so how did that change when you became senior manager?
So there were times when we met with DEA in Washington, D.C., and I then would participate in those meetings.
I see. And a moment ago when you said that the only thing that really changed was your interactions with the DEA relative to when you were a manager, please describe what your responsibilities were then as a manager of the Controlled Substance Compliance Group.
As a manager of the Controlled Substances Compliance Group, I had primary responsibilities associated with the St. Louis plant function in the beginning. And then, as time went on, we acquired the Hobart, New York facility, and they came in as part of our group.
Derek, can you hit that red button, please? Can you follow resign? Hit the red button. Follow real time.
You can bring that closer to you.
Yeah. Sorry, do you mind if we go off the record for just a second?
We're going off the record at 9:40 a.m.